for us, dual VET rests within our economic empowerment thematic area. We see it as a vehicle for empowering persons with disabilities. We implement a dualized VET, where also our trainees are considered as a student, more in ownership within the VET schools. We follow the Ethiopian TVET system. For instance, if we see the Ethiopian case where 70% of the training is work-based, expected to be work-based, and 30% is in the training in the TVET institution. So we try to make sure that persons with disabilities access quality and inclusive TVET training so that they become, productive in their societies. And we supported economically, as part of our economic empowerment programs, about 16,000 persons with disabilities. Most of them are women, about 60% of them. So within this also, about 30% of it is, which is closer to 6,000 received skills development, skills training in different settings. It's not easy since the issue of disability is intertwined with prejudices, misconceptions, and in most cases, people see the limitation in our trainees with disabilities. So we have to really change the mindset of different actors, trainers, training school administrators, even enterprises, even for that matter, trainees with disabilities themselves. But the good thing is, once that is clear, once what is needed is done, which I will mention in a while, in a bit, we prove that inclusion works. It is possible to train youth with different types of impairments so that they can become productive member of a society.
Of course, as you know, the most critical challenge that we have is the attitude of the people toward persons with disabilities. And for us to overcome this attitude, we have what we call community-based rehabilitation programs, which are implemented at community levels, which allow us to identify young adults with disabilities, to identify young girls with disabilities, and also women, and refer them to the vocational training centers. And of course, the vocational training center are not prepared from the trainers, the infrastructures, the curriculums, the entire environment is not prepared.
Yeah, we have several entry points to make sure that, we break barriers and open doors for our trainees with disabilities. Mainly, the first thing we do is we sensitize, trainers, TVET Institute administrators, even guards, within the TVET center, to make sure that the environment is inclusive and accessible for them. That is one thing we do. Same thing we would also do in the enterprises where the training, happens. We conduct physical accessibility audits to identify barriers, that would limit mobility of trainees with impairments. Based on the assessments that we do, we will remove barriers, conduct basic accessibility modification works. We would sit together with the trainers and TVET institutes to adapt, curricula, to introduce a number of tools that would enhance the training quality and accessibility. These are some of the things that we do.
So we as LightForTheWorld, we needed to start working with the vocational training centers to do the trainings of the trainers for them to understand what is disability inclusion is, what are the rights of persons with disability, what's the UN conventions, and also we needed to do the adaptation of the curriculum of the vocational training centers in the way that also can be inclusive. And in the beginning, we needed also to deploy some sign language interpreters and also the braille readers, because the trainers were not prepared to understand the sign language and also to read braille. Through this process, it was really good that we saw that the vocational training center, where they have this political will to make the changes. This was key element for the successful of our programs.
So to overcome, some of these barriers, I think we have to make sure that course selection and enrollment is inclusive. We have to make sure that we engage parents and guardians. Even programs that intend to target persons with disabilities in their skills training, they have to invest a lot carefully on the first batch. If they are successful in the first batch, the second, the third, the other batch would be coming because of them, looking at the success. So the first batch will be our champions, our ambassadors. That is one thing to consider. The second thing is we have to empower, youth to select the right course, looking at their ambitions, their aspirations. Some programs would, think, okay, you are deaf, so woodwork is good for you. No, there might be ways we can see a potential in a certain type of impairment rather than automatically matching the impairment with a training area. So that is something we need to consider. And this comes with the right assessment during identification phase, assessing the impairment, because disability is not a homogeneous, or impairments are not homogeneous, heterogeneous, with a different and a number of levels of capability. So we have to look into that. That is the other thing. And showing the students with the job content and the prospect that they have. If they do this course, you will do this, you will become this. So we have to tell them clearly what is in it for them after going into the training. And the most important thing, especially when it comes to young people with disabilities, is provision of assistive devices. We have this thing called a twin track approach that we follow. We make sure that trainings are available and accessible in an inclusive manner within the mainstream training institutes on the first track. On the second track also, we work on responding to disability-specific needs, these trainees that they have. So this includes assistive devices. So we have to think of also reasonable accommodations, looking into specific situation of our trainee. If that person is a blind person, what are we going to offer? If that person is a wheelchair user, crutch user, psychosocial, intellectual impairment. So we look into, adaptations and accommodations that we need to offer. Then ultimately that will bring in the much needed success in our work. In most companies, the major issue is attitudinal problem, thinking that trainees with disabilities are not trainable. That is one thing. So we have to really change their attitude. The second is the physical accessibility, the space where they provide the training, the shops, the workshops, the facilities. In some of the cases, it might not be accessible. The third is related with tools and machineries, also accessibility, because had it been in a training center, it might be a bit easier, or we may find ways to adapt tools to the needs of trainees. In the companies, it would be difficult because of the policies, the systems, the safety procedures, number of things. So these are some of the challenges.
The recommendation that I would say is that vocational training center is key for a person with disability to improve their living standard, because it gives opportunity for a person with disability to have a profession and then for access to the labor market. But also, we cannot only stay with the labor market. We need also to promote self-employment through provision of startup kits, and not only give the startup kit itself as such, but also to provide the coaching, the mentoring during a certain period of time, so to allow them to understand what is business. Because from our experience, we have seen that if the support is not extended for a long time, they might drop out.
I think one thing is the importance of nothing about us without us. Myself, as a person with disability, I passionately work on disability inclusion and promoting inclusion of trainees with disabilities in mainstream TVET. The same thing should happen in the training institutes. Not only trainees with disabilities, but also trainers with disabilities, with a lived experience of disability, also make a difference in the quality of the training, in the inclusiveness of the training. So programs and organizations also think of making sure that their programs are inclusive. The participation of persons with disabilities themselves and their associations is indispensable.